Welcome back to the Intentional Intern Podcast. This week's guest is Alethea Freidberg, a recent graduate from the University of Southern California with the Bachelor's of Science in Music Industry from USC's Thornton School of Music. She also has a minor in Culture, Media, and Entertainment from the USC Annenberg School of Communication and Journalism. She currently works in the music industry, and at the time this episode was recorded, she was primarily freelancing in music marketing alongside writing for her blog, Industry Plant. Now, she currently serves as community manager for She Is the Music and the She Is You College Ambassador Program. She is also getting ready to embark on a new professional opportunity starting very soon, so be on the lookout for her LinkedIn post. Throughout the episode, Alethea and I discuss her passion for music, her love for all things creative, the adaptability of Gen Z, being resilient in the job market as a recent grad, and of course, more. The reflective dialogue we have about our generation, music, and marketing all together was definitely super insightful listening back, so I hope this offers the same opportunity and insight to you all. For those who want to connect with Alethea, you can find her LinkedIn and a link to her publication Industry Plant below. With that, let's get into today's episode. Hi, Alethea. How are you?
Good. How are you, Amaya?
I'm doing good. Thank you for asking. And I'm doing even better now that you're on the podcast. So I'm super excited to have you on today.
Yeah, likewise as well. I'm super excited to be on the Intentional Intern, and I think we're going to have such an amazing conversation. I know we have a lot of topics we both want to cover. So if you want to kick the podcast off.
Always happy to do it. And I would love for you to start by introducing yourself to our audience. So who are you?
Yeah, so I am Alethea Freidberg. I am a current music industry professional who also has kind of my hands in a lot of different buckets, including freelance marketing. I run a blog, and I also work on a music venue. So to start off, I'm going to talk a bit about my career journey. I went to the University of Southern California, where I studied music industry and minored in culture, media, entertainment, and I graduated in May of 2023. From my time at USC, I took a full course load. I had a variety of internships, including at companies such as BMG, Big Picture Media, and Venice. Ever since I've graduated from college, I have had my hands full in a variety of buckets. I currently work at a music venue that is club size called the Paramount. I also am a freelance music marketing consultant for UK-based marketing agency Lemon Tank, which specializes in doing social media marketing campaigns for artists that want to market themselves towards Gen Z. I recently started my publication Industry Plant, which is a digital publication dedicated to all things music industry, fandom, and fan engagement. And why I work in music, I literally just did an article for my blog about it, is that I've always had this love and passion for music. And when I was 13, I kind of had this epiphany that it was a real thing I could, do and really partake and immerse myself in. I was always a fangirl growing up. I did musical theater, so I was very involved in that universe. And I just knew I wanted to continue my journey on from there. And currently with my degree, obviously I've been working a few jobs, but I'm really looking for that first full-time role in the music industry. And my goal one day is to be a music executive, specifically in the marketing, creative A&R, artist services area. And one thing about me is that I do want to be bi-coastal. I am originally from Long Island, New York, but I went to college out in Los Angeles. So that's something that really is a big part of my experience, being in two completely different parts of the country, and it's really shaped me and who I am professionally. And for me in particular, going to school in Los Angeles helped me work there and immerse myself in the Los Angeles music scene, but also because I am from Long Island, I'm very privileged to be from the New York City area, and it's definitely opened the doors for myself to embark on some New York City-based opportunities.
You have done probably everything under the sun at this point, or at least like you said earlier, you have your hands in a lot of different buckets right now, which is super interesting to me of how you are kind of combining not just music, but also marketing and how you're able to intertwine the two based on the things that you're pursuing right now. And I wanted to understand from your perspective, just straight off of the amazing intro that you gave and just talking about all of your experience from the past to the present within your college and career experience. You talked a little bit about music and what got you into music. I wanted to know a little bit more and get a little bit more in depth with that. So You talked about specific areas of music that you wanted to be in. How did you know, or when did you know that you wanted to be in those specific areas versus, when people hear, oh, I want to be in music, they typically think about artists or being on that other side. So how did you know that you wanted to be in those specific realms of music?
For me in particular, I kind of had a bit of a journey to get to where I am in my career. When I was applying to colleges, the majority of schools I actually applied to were pre-law, poli-sci, in the hopes of me becoming an entertainment lawyer, specifically focusing on copyright law. Fun fact about me is I did Model UN in high school, so I kind of had that background, which made me a good poli-sci pre-law applicant. And then when I got into USC's music industry program, I was very shocked at first. I was like, oh my God, this is my dream school, dream program. I can actually explore the music industry and not pigeonhole myself into entertainment law. But I kind of ruled out that entertainment law wasn't for me at the time from taking a class. And at first, I wanted to work in festivals. I mean, I'm pretty open to what areas of the music industry I will have my journey in. But what drew me into both marketing and A&R, which is short for artist and repertoire, is my love for songwriting and my love for music and my ability and desire to help shape an artist's career in particular and just engage in some amazing campaigns and release strategies. My first experience in the A&R realm in particular was from being involved in my student-run record label at USC called 840 West. It was the inaugural semester, inaugural team, so it was really great to be involved on a team from the ground up trying to find the best USC talent. And how I stumbled into marketing was kind of accidental, but honestly, I'm not surprised I ended up in that realm. So in high school, actually, I was president of drama club. I know I should not be harping on my high school experiences, but during that time, I started the social media account for the club, and I actually submitted that as part of my USC application, thinking, oh yeah, I can do social media. 4 years after that, I was an A&R intern at Venice. This is spring of my junior year, so spring 2022. And in the middle of the semester, the digital marketing intern had to leave for another project, and my supervisor told me, hey, I think you're the right candidate to hop on and try some digital marketing. Would you love to do it? And of course, I said yes at the opportunity. I was like, I have to try this. I can't say no. I'm very much the type of person that is willing to dive headfirst into something. So I just dove headfirst into digital marketing, and I really became fascinated with it. I loved it from the get-go. It was so interesting, so unique, so dynamic. And I'd had some exposure to marketing before. I took a DIY marketing class for independent artists in college. She is the music mentee, and I was sitting on a panel as part of the program with Olivia Rodrigo's marketing team at Interscope Geffen Records. So that's kind of how I got exposed to those two paths. And from there, the reason I've really stuck with marketing in particular is because I just see that as a clear way for me to really evolve in the music industry. And yes, if you asked me senior year of college what I wanted to do, it was become an A&R. And I even wrote a paper on A&R while I was doing a digital marketing internship. However, kind of doing some reflection and figuring out what I really want in a career led me towards marketing. And it's just music marketing is such a unique field in which the best music marketers are the ones that can think outside the box, because the best music marketing campaigns are the ones that keep people talking. And one that comes to mind is the Brat campaign by Charlie XCX. That campaign has evolved from, your out of the box music marketing rollout to a cultural moment. And that's what I want to help be a part of. And that's just something, especially because I'm both a consumer of music and a music marketer, I'm very cognizant of when I'm seeing an artist do a rollout, and I like being involved in those types of projects.
Wow, that's super cool. And I know you said earlier, just talking about you were harping on like your high school experiences of things that you've done. I think those are still very valid experiences to include, even in your story, for whether you become an A&R director or if you become an executive in marketing within music. I think every single experience counts. And that's super cool that you were able to have that experience, especially at such a young age, to be able to create a platform of such, things like that for high school is huge. I think of having a platform that is able to be found by people, not just where you are, but also being able to find that type of platform and that media for what club you were doing is super important. And I'm glad that you were able to showcase that as a meaningful part of your resume to how you were applying to college, almost like your first form of experience. So from an HR standpoint, I think that's really cool.
Yeah. And even when I've been applying to jobs, I saw one like event coordinator experience, which is kind of something up my alley, requiring prior stage management experience. And even though it's not like on my resume on paper, because I have a lot of other experiences I've been focusing on, I technically have that experience from high school. But obviously, there's the paradox of when is too far back to include on my resume, especially like with me in particular. I'm just always been the type of person to be over involved and have my hands in multiple buckets at once. So my resume, like as of right now, like doesn't even go back all the way throughout my college experience. And I actually wanted to bring up how I started interning in the music industry. So my first internship was in 2020. It was virtual, and I discovered this internship through a professor at USC who knew the um, head and the CEO of the company. It's called I Voted. They're doing incredible things to promote voter turnout with the intersection of music and, just like combine those two audiences, especially in an important election year. And from there, I got very adapted to working on Zoom, both from that internship and also being a student on Zoom during the pandemic at USC. My entire sophomore year was virtual. And I only did my first in-person internship the fall of my senior year in fall of 2022. And that was my first time ever working in an office. And even like with interviews and stuff and just being a part of the job market, it's just so commonplace to do virtual interviews or have virtual work. And, that's something I definitely had to adjust to when I first, was working in the office as an intern. And I was so used to connecting with people virtually and not having that in-person face-to-face connection, but it is so valuable to have. And once I kind of learned how to, manage those connections and like, really network in person, which I wasn't really taught in school. That's something you have to like learn for yourself. I loved being able to do that. And I loved being able to finally, talk to my coworkers, not just about work, but about their personal lives. And just, it's very different working virtually versus working in an office. And there's very much benefits of both.
I totally agree with you, especially with our generation. We grew up starting our formative years, meaning like in high school and such, with the pandemic, and then figuring out how to navigate through that. What then, like our first of, like you said, thinking about corporate life, thinking about what it means to be a professional within a space where there's also the pandemic, which that experience of going through a pandemic and then having to find different ways to connect beyond the natural version of in-person connection and exploring what virtual life looks like is super interesting. But it's good, to your point, that you were able to find other ways to navigate that, especially within that being such a hard time. And again, such a formative time for people who are starting out their careers, nonetheless being an intern.
Yeah, and in fact, I think it's kind of an added skill in the wheelhouse of our generation that we can both work remotely and in person. And I would describe Gen Z as very much early adapters of technology and platforms. And even though we were obviously taught technology in schools, like I vividly remember learning Microsoft, I vividly remember learning how to type, is that we're able to like use technology and adapt to it. And I think that's something that's very uniquely Gen Z versus the younger generation that's just been always had that technology, and the older generations that, very much this is all new for them versus, oh yeah, it's new for us, but we very much can adapt.
Exactly. I do agree. I mean, nobody else has had to do it. And then nobody else, beyond like our years, again, has had experience with that. And so I think that should definitely be counted as something that is super interesting to think about from an adaptation standpoint, of not necessarily something that's like, okay, this isn't an added on. This is something that was like necessary for us to do in order to learn how to kind of immerse ourselves into the unique workplaces that we were going into.
Yeah, like even from when I came into college, like I wasn't expecting that most of my interviews would be virtual. I obviously wasn't expecting the global pandemic. And obviously, it's just something that, it's not that we've had to learn, but we just all, I think Gen Z is very proactive and flexible. And ironically, it's something I see a lot in job descriptions. And obviously, if you have a Gen Z employee, chances are they're pretty flexible. They're so used to having new technology, new things thrown at them, and they can adapt. It's just, I would describe not just necessarily myself, but like our entire generation, we're very adaptable.
I agree. And from your experience, especially being a Gen Z, what does that look like within like the marketing or music realm side of things? What do you think are some skills that Gen Z has that makes us super adaptable but also attractive within those environments and industries?
So, in particular, it's very important to have Gen Z on teams where they're having to market to Gen Z because this generation has an incredible amount of purchasing power. Even though we're considered the digital natives, they very much are used to trend cycles going through faster, exponentially faster. So I just think it's important to have people that understand the climate of those types of consumers and really market them. And I just think Gen Z, they're very creative. They are out of the box thinkers. And I think more and more, I think marketing teams should be relying not off of Gen Z talent, but really, let them have a seat in the table. They very much are are people that have something unique to contribute because they've grown up with various life cycles. And I think it's all about innovation. And Gen Z is very innovative. And I feel like you can tell when something is being marketed and it's not, it could be done better, more so in a way where it's like, oh, this thing was a trend 3 months ago versus now. Like social media, the way that the landscape is, it just moves so fast, like in the digital realm in particular. So like you have to be adaptable, you have to be on point. Alongside that, I would say it's so important to have Gen Z talent contributing teams because especially in marketing, social media, sales, HR, like the people forward teams, because having that voice really, diversifies the types of clients that you could reach, but also just having that voice in a people centric team, like you need to know your audience. That's like one of the biggest things that I've learned from working in marketing. And if you're marketing to Gen Z, it's important to know how they respond to things and what they're going to do about it. And in particular, because I freelance for Gen Z consumers, it's something that's very much like being in tune with what people want and also recognizing the fact that Gen Z, again, I'm both a consumer and a marketing professional. So when I'm coming into the marketing room with ideas and I'm just sharing what works, it's from seeing the stuff on my For You page. It's seeing like what is marketed to me and what is doing well versus what is not, and what really catches my eye versus what is falling flat. And that's kind of something that, Gen Z, they're the early adopters, they're the trendsetters. They're not necessarily the gatekeepers, as I'd say a lot of other generations were before, but they really have the ability to make a product, a song, an artist just bigger than themselves and have contributed so much to the landscape of not only the internet, but just pop culture in general. And again, this is coming from a music marketing perspective, but all of the biggest chart topping hits right now, the biggest stars in music, the biggest songs of the summer, they're all coming from artists that receive well with Gen Z, like the Charlie XCXs, the Chapel Roans, the Sabrina Carpenters. And you think about also how they have that purchasing power. They're the ones buying tickets. They're the ones that are willing to spend their disposable income on concert tickets, on products that just like are not necessarily trendy, but like early adopters. And also one thing about Gen Z is that there's very much like, which could be a good thing or bad thing, they're individualistic and they want to be like on trend before someone else is. And they want to be distinct. And I think that comes from a message of like, be yourself from like as a child, like we were being told that like you have to be yourself. So I think that's definitely contributed to Gen Z culture.
Yeah, no, I think so too. It's so interesting to kind of see like Gen Z itself is pretty unpredictable, yet so predictable in a way. But it's like only a Gen Z person would kind of get that. And then being on the outside of that and then trying to kind of understand what exactly like the prototype or like the model Gen Z person is it's super interesting. And I always wonder where people start with their research in that and understanding the necessary like values of a Gen Z audience, just because they can fluctuate, especially depending on the industry, the celebrity, the artist, like who we're talking about. Because then the fields of what Gen Z cares about in regards to those things and what they'll amplify is completely different. And sometimes some of those things you can't necessarily predict. So it's super interesting, especially to hear from your perspective, not just in like typical marketing, but also in music marketing, which is typically an industry where you are trying to propel the music forward and broaden the reach of not just the music itself, but the artist. And then combining that with like the traditional values of marketing, where you are looking to kind of broaden the overall audience that the person has, or maybe what those things look like. You can always go so many different ways with that, whether how you're marketing the artist to how you're marketing the music. And I think like platforms like TikTok completely changed the game of exactly how music can be marketed. So not even traditionally just in like its genre, but even if you're going from like a meme standpoint, if it becomes like the standard music for one meme that blows up everywhere, that in itself is like a huge cultural moment, like you were saying earlier, that you just can't compare necessarily to other album sales unless you're like, you know, The Weeknd or Beyonce or Taylor Swift or something like that, who's already had that existing chart topping success. So it is, like you said, from your point, just I think super informative also from a way of just understanding. I think if you can understand how Gen Z operates, it could be the baseline foundation for understanding how early audiences like Gen Alpha and then past that will potentially operate, because it's a new level of being unconsistently like consistent in the same way, and just learning how to create your own strategies through that.
Oh, agreed. One thing that I've tended to notice is that the like gradual and accelerated democratization of platforms such as social media, streaming, which obviously 20, 25, even 30 years ago, that was not a thing. It was who can sell the most records versus now it's who can get the most streams, who can get the most views. Now there's a space for more people, more subgenres. Like music is blending together. And one thing I've really learned from working in music marketing and also being a music consumer is that you have to create your own niche, and that's what becomes popular. Like that is the best way to set yourself up for success as an artist and as a music marketer. And I think about Taylor Swift and how she blew up. So Taylor Swift was very successful in the early days because she started out doing country music for teens by teens. Like she was 16 years old and marketing her country music towards teenagers. And she was using MySpace to become super popular. There was this whole community on the internet, on MySpace, on Facebook back in the early mid 2000s that were around her age that loved her music. And she's, again, the millennial representation of that, how her fans discovered her. But thinking about Gen Z and thinking about all the different stan communities, they're all so distinct. Like, obviously, like not everyone's going to listen to the same artist, but if someone sees an artist that is in their niche and they're like, hey, this is cool, I want to listen to that, they're more likely going to have a loyal fan. And as we've seen with people like Charlie XCX, with people that have had that like those slow and steady rises and all of a sudden are huge, like Sabrina Carpenter, it's because they've had a loyal fan base that has always, had their niche. And like Sabrina, she has her niche now, I'd say solidly from her earlier career, but that build is worth it because now she's popular outside of her niche and she has people outside of her target audience that like want to listen to her and make her this global pop star versus, being this like girly pop, like singer-songwriter, kind of like post teeny bop style of music. And I think that's so important, especially with, the democratization of music and media, is that there's no one right way to be an artist and there's no one right way to music market. And you have to be considerate of what you're marketing, who you're marketing to, and what do people in this niche listen to? What does this audience like? And I very much see this firsthand from my job at a venue. And I work a variety of shows. I work everything from tribute bands to up and coming acts to legacy acts, all sorts of audiences. And I've definitely noticed the differences between each crowd and how the show was marketed from the venue to the fans and how each fan is so different. Like you can't expect like the same strategy to work for two distinct types of shows and artists. And that's something that just carries over not only to music marketing, but to general marketing. You can't market a store like Erewhon the same way that you would market like a Stop and Shop, like a regular supermarket. They're two different things. And you can't market Coca-Cola the same way you would market Pop being Olipop, even though they're both sodas.
Exactly. I understand that. And especially like that's trying to say, you know, you could do a band like Panic at the Disco and you could market them like Beyonce. That's just not going to go well. Not just because, oh, well, they're both successful. And then that is just the basis that you're going off of just throwing out any type of strategy or initiative or campaign, but really understanding what their ground audiences come from. And I think it's even more interesting when we see artists who are particularly successful or even up and coming, but if they have that moment of being successful, not just because of their music, but also because of their personality, or again, going back to like something, some cultural moment that they were associated with and like they're forever known for. And so I can think maybe about like a couple of different like Beyonce memes or sayings within interviews or things like that that always come up that she'll always be known by, or even thinking about like some other artists like Nicki Minaj, for example. There are always sound bites of her voice going around everywhere and people using that, especially in a lot of different contexts. And you see people also making merch off of those things, of whatever they get famous off of, because that's a cultural reset moment for them that's super rare that they'll always be able to capitalize off. And they'll not only be known like from their artist perspective of, oh, they were a top artist in this genre, but they may even have like their own like specialized name, like being the it girl, or being like, for example, Michael Jackson always being the king of pop, or things like that, things that no one can ever take away from them, but they'll still be able to talk about for the rest of their lives and be able to capitalize off of. So it's super interesting to see how those things are merged and how those things come to play, especially in what that looks like.
Yeah, I do have to wonder though, what happens when you're only known for one thing and you're trying to basically rely off that for the rest of your career? And I'm thinking of mainly cultural moments and memes that have kind of, been a 15-second, 15 minutes of fame type of ordeal. Like I'm thinking of the Hawk Twa girl, and I saw a video essay from this YouTube creator, Tyler Bender, who analyzed like what will happen to her career. Is she doing the wrong thing by just trying to like cash in after being a meme and sign with an agency? And I think of all of those, the short form memes, like the Alex from Target, the Damn Daniel guy. And like, if you want to capitalize on that, you have to be strategic about it, because one of those examples in particular, Mason Ramsey, if you remember the Yoda boy from Target, he now has a whole country music career. And yeah, you would listen to his music and be like, oh, that's the Yoda boy. But now he's doing this country music and he is actually making a name for himself outside of being that one meme. And I think that's something, especially with Gen Z's attention span and how fast the trend and social media life cycle goes, is something to keep in consideration if you're trying to rely on one thing. And obviously someone like a Beyonce or Michael Jackson, they have so much to rely on with their career. Like they're both such accomplished artists. They've transcended like cultural norms and boundaries. Like they're their own cultural moments versus someone like Hawk Twa or like a Yoda boy.
I think that's a really good point as well, especially from the perspective of Gen Z having such a short attention span. With that meaning, even you have such an even shorter window of exactly what you were talking about, that 15 minutes of fame potentially just could really mean 5 seconds within the digital world and what that looks like. It could be on Twitter one day and then it could be completely gone the next day. So really figuring out how you can create initiatives and finding a way to innovatively take that, but be able to capitalize off of that, almost like your own form of like a digital experience resume. And how can you take whatever comments, likes, reach, amplifications, things like that, down to your impressions? What does that mean to an audience? And finding the right audience too. And that goes down to like the right management, the right agency, things like that. And being able to really market yourself for something bigger than just that one thing. And for those who are known for that one thing and they've been able to creatively capitalize on that for other endeavors, that's great. I think it will just be even more of a challenge, especially with the dynamic of attention spans and how much content that's coming out every single day, and battling that to figure out how you can manage that.
Yeah, and I obviously think it's very hard for like artists themselves and people that are not only necessarily producing their own music, but are now having to become content creators in one way or another. Sometimes TikTok and social media just doesn't come naturally to an artist. And even there could be like someone like me, obviously, I'm not an influencer as of right now, but I very much am aware of what does well on social media. So having that knowledge and expertise and working with an artist that's like, I don't like doing this. How do I post that's like in my voice, but also is very much going to stick and reach an audience and more importantly, build a fan base. I think that's an important skill set that I bring to the table is by being able to work with artists and say, hey, I know this is very much not like you, but this is a way that we can build your fan base. And in particular, one of the artists I work with, she very much is, has her own voice on social media. She's not the biggest fan of doing all that stuff. Like it's not necessarily like her, but I've really been able to help her come into her own and tell her, hey, this is the way you should go. And in particular, I will say this that having a brand strategy from a marketing perspective is so important. And again, having that niche is really what can drive career success. And if you don't have that distinguishable brand, it will be harder for someone to remember your product, remember that song, and so on.
I totally agree. And I kind of want to spin that in that direction for you from your standpoint, talking about branding. So, especially being someone who is so integrated into not just the music side, but also the marketing perspective, and even thinking about it from a general marketing standpoint. When you are having to bet on yourself and be able to go into these interviews and rooms and think about how you're going to market yourself for the next step in your career, what do you think are some of your top strengths and how do you present your personal brand in that way?
For me in particular, obviously, you have to have a really solid elevator pitch. Like that is your first impression. And that's something I've learned from, taking branding classes, from being involved in extracurricular activities and like having to meet so many people. I was in a sorority in college, so I could not even tell you how many people I met just going through recruitment and recruiting people. But alongside that, you got to be a storyteller. And that's something that I really, harness myself and pride myself on being a really strong storyteller. Again, it comes from that background, having that exposure to theater, loving songwriting, and just loving narrative art is something that really kind of inspires me to harness my own brand. And obviously, when you're trying to impress a recruiter, when you're trying to impress someone on a hiring team, they want to know you as a person. And also, with that in mind, like being very personal and really just trying to connect with someone on any common ground. That's kind of how I help stand out and really, obviously not everyone has the same interest or the same values as you, but just trying to find some common ground is so important. And when you're in an interview, it's supposed to be a conversation, not necessarily an interview where it's like a back and forth. And that's personally where I've had the most success with meeting people and just, finding things in common outside of the career space.
It's super interesting to hear. I love to see what people go and they like to express within their interviews, especially within different industries, and then especially going deeper into the marketing space. It's always super cool to see how people operate and what they think about in terms of their own personal branding. And one thing I wanted to kind of capitalize off of that you were talking about in that conversation was just showcasing your experience and making sure that you're showing all of the possibilities and potentials of everything you can do throughout how your elevator pitches down to how you're tying in your experience and just making that first great impression. When talking about some of the challenges or things that you face, what have been some of the biggest moments for you that you've learned from within your career so far as an early career talent?
Honestly, I personally, over the last year, have faced a lot of rejection. And obviously, trying to land an internship is different than trying to land a job. And not necessarily navigating rejection, but reflecting on what can I do better, which sometimes can lead into I'm being so hard on myself. Because as someone that works in marketing, there's so much pressure to be perfect, to have the right campaign, to know the right answers, to know the right market, to know the right audience, and so on and so on. And I think that's definitely been one of my challenges is to not be too hard on myself. And a big thing I've been struggling with is comparing myself to others in my program and in my field. And obviously the music industry, it's a community. It's not it shouldn't be seen as competitive. And that's something I've been struggling with, to be honest. Like, obviously I love all my friends and all my peers that work in music, but when I'm competing with my friends to land jobs, it can be very, difficult at times to kind of see the silver lining. Like, you have to know when to draw the line behind, like, not getting upset over other people's successes and also harnessing on that self doubt and just, it can be very hard. Like, obviously, like trying to break into a very competitive industry can impact your self worth. And one thing I've really learned is just how to persevere. I've learned that throughout my entire career experience. I've learned that through high school, through college, and just being able to persevere. And I've really also had to learn adaptability. Like, I had a full 5-year plan coming out of college, and obviously life just does not turn out that way. So adaptability and resilience is one thing I've learned from my challenges with trying to work in music. And obviously it's so competitive. Like, I'm competing for the same jobs that people that have graduated 3, 4, even 5 years ago are competing with alongside new grads. So it can be very hard to kind of like make yourself known, which is why branding and trying not to like not only sell yourself, but just make connections with the people that you're talking to is so important when you're interviewing and when you're meeting new people, even if you're just, having a coffee chat. It's just so important to, make those connections and not be too hard on yourself. And one thing I've learned is just to not take every rejection personally. Like, rejection is redirection. A mentor told me once, a no is a delayed yes. So maybe when you think this opportunity that might have been your dream job, you don't land, you just have to know maybe it wasn't the dream job for you. And that's definitely something that's really helped me shift my mentality over the past few months. I remember when I was talking to one of my friends, I was waiting on a job decision, and I was waiting a few weeks and I followed up. But I had come to terms with, if I don't land this job, that means I wasn't the right fit for it. No, it means not that I wasn't the right fit for it, but more so the job wasn't the right fit for me. And I think that's a very important thing that everyone interviewing for jobs and people that are job seekers to know, is that sometimes a rejection is for the best.
No, exactly. I understand, especially as another person who had a 5-year, not necessarily 5-year, but I'll say like a 5-month plan. I always like to plan ahead to see what my life is like. And like you said, life is lifing sometimes. You don't have control over it. And within those moments that everything crumbles within, like underneath your feet, that's when you have those moments of, oh, right, I don't control every single aspect of my life as much as I would want to, especially when it comes to things that fund your lifestyle, like your stability and your career. And then those things being tied into like your personal values, whether it's those values are tied to yourself or to passions that make you feel like yourself and things like that. So it's very hard. And multiple, if not almost all people who are Gen Z job searching that don't have a job and have faced what the current job market looks like, as this is our first time really being in the job market. I would say middle of Gen Z to about the end of Gen Z, us really, this being our first time within the market, it is a scary feeling to understand that. And again, just like the pandemic, we didn't have anybody that could give us prior guidance to this because we were all going through it together. So within this job market, we definitely don't have anybody with prior experience because every generation before us, their market looked way different, but it was also way more accessible and it was way more of an opportunity to find something versus the very, very, very evident challenges within the job market today, where everybody, no matter what generation you're coming from, if you're unemployed and you're trying to become employed, has been struggling. So rejection is redirection is definitely one of the most powerful affirmations and mantras that you can tell yourself, especially within the season that everybody's going through. And it's super nice to see the outlook that you have on it, of being able to say that and come through and be extremely resilient. And that is a super big skill, not just within the market, but within any career that you're going to hold that you should always have. So it's super nice to see your positive look on that perspective.
Thank you. I will say something like my positivity, it really, keeps me going. And if I didn't love music, I wouldn't be trying to break through into the music industry. And if I wasn't passionate about what I was doing, I wouldn't give it my all. And that's something that very much like distinguishes me as well is that I'm a fighter. I will fight for every opportunity I earn, and I will bring the most positivity. I will bring my energy and just make the most of it. And that's another thing that really not only sets me apart, but it's something I've learned from being a member of Gen Z, but also kind of, from my experiences as a performer as a child to now wanting to work in an ultra competitive industry. Like, obviously, times won't go the way they want. It's just how you pick yourself up off the ground. Like, when I tell my friends, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade, I tell them, not only make lemonade, but make a Starbucks strawberry acai refresher. That's what I tell myself. That's why I tell my friends why I give them that saying, because obviously, even though I am very much part of Gen Z, I'm older than a lot of my friends. And one of my best friends just graduated college this last year. She, like me, has had a lot of sentiments about the job search. And I've been telling her, like, you just got to keep your head up. When life gives you lemons, not only make lemonade, but make a strawberry acai refresher. Like, you do you, you got this, we got this, we're all in this together, as you said. And I think between both of us, we're so resilient. And yeah, resilience is not only just something that helps me stand out, it's something that helps Gen Z stand out, because we've lived, I feel like there have been times where it's like I've lived like 5 lifetimes and I'm 22. And just our generation has been through a lot. And I think our resilience and adaptability is a great strength. And I think that strength is underlooked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it can be undervalued at times, especially when the world has to be resilient, right? And everybody's finding this new strength, but definitely Gen Z, from an adaptive layer of understanding how that will look like in the future. I'm very excited to see kind of what persona studies come out of how Gen Z has evolved from what we've had to go through from a very young age, just like with any generation, their trials and tribulations. But definitely with us being the first generation to have like fully the age of the internet and things like that, just seeing how that plays out. And I want us to leave the podcast on another good note beyond rejection being directions that take us in better places and no's being delayed yeses for us. I want to talk about something we kind of touched on earlier. So going away from that 5-year plan idea that we talked about earlier and steering from always wanting to be prepared, I want to know, what are your goals that you have for yourself just as a person? What are some things that you're looking forward to accomplishing, whether those are professional or personal, just some things that you're looking to have a good impact on, no matter when they happen in your life? What are some things you're looking forward to?
One thing I'm really looking forward to as I advance in my music industry career, well, first of all, I have to land my very first entry-level music industry job, is really helping amplify an artist's career in whichever way I can, and just being adaptable to their needs and their audience. That's something I really want to do. And I really want to be at the intersection of digital marketing, A&R, fan engagement, and really just contribute in that way. And honestly, one thing about me is I'm very open to where the future takes me. I obviously do want to get an MBA at some point, and I really at some point I do want to shift my skills to focus more on leadership, because I've always just been a natural born leader, and I really want to embrace that side of my career at some point. Alongside that, I really want to evolve my blog industry plan out. Although right now I'm contributing articles once a week, I very much enjoy writing. Outside of music, I do want to write my own book one day, and I do want to run a marathon. Although right now I'm just aiming towards a half first, which may or may not be next spring as of the recording of this podcast. And I really just, want to be a future leader in the music industry. And obviously, the music industry, it's a great place, but there's so much that needs change. And I want to be part of that next generation of change and really be a trailblazer and be a force and contribute my unique ideas in whichever way possible, whether it be in artist marketing, whether it be in A&R, and so on, and really just be that force of change. And, really, I want the industry when I retire to be completely different in a good way from when I first started out. That is my goal one day. And my goal, obviously, one day besides that is to oversee the careers of so many incredible artists and oversee teams of incredible, talented people, that really want to help make the music industry a better place and really contribute their knowledge to creating the best marketing campaigns, creating the best songs, and so on. So yeah, those are kind of my goals. I know this sounds so rambly, but obviously this is the first time I've kind of been asked, like, what are your goals besides, like, what do you want to do when you're older and be a CEO? So I really appreciate this question, Amaya.
Anytime. I love to look at things from different angles and different perspectives. So if there's always any way that I can kind of engage people on a different level or a deeper level, I'm always going to do that. So it's nice that I was able to do that for you. And I appreciate you also just coming on the podcast today and sharing so much information, not just about music and marketing and how they intertwine, but about yourself and all of the strengths that you bring to the table when it comes to understanding Gen Z from a different perspective, understanding how to help markets and artists really be able to elevate themselves to a different level with all of the innovative and creative strategies that you have in mind, and seeing what impacts that you want to have in the future.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you helping guide this conversation. I've learned a lot from you and your experiences. Obviously, this podcast was mainly focused on, our dialogue with Gen Z and marketing, but I hope you learned I hope you learned a thing or two about the music industry. And obviously, as young professionals, I really want to help us both succeed. And I know you're going to do amazing things in your career, Maya.
Thank you so much. And I have the same outlook from you. I've definitely learned a lot about music and marketing, starting with what A&R means. This is definitely an episode that you want to come back to when you're thinking about not just the basics of what that looks like, but how we may elevate forward, especially as a Gen Z community.
Yes. And if anyone is looking for some advice that I would take away is that the work is worth it. And as I said earlier, a no is a delayed yes. And there's so much opportunity out there. Like when one door closes, 5 slam open.
Exactly. And I love that you said slam open. They immediately become open for you. So don't think that that's something that you necessarily have to just crease yourself into. Those opportunities, if they are for you, they will not miss you. And so my final thing that I wanted to ask you was, what can we follow you on to support your journey? So from your blog to what you're doing next, what are some ways that we can support you?
So if you want to follow me on my career journey, you can obviously connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very open to connecting with all sorts of people, both in music and marketing. And I'm grateful to have coffee chats and just learn from anyone. Alongside that, you can check out my publication, Industry Plant, which is linked down below. Alongside that, I recently started an advice column called Ask Alethea on my blog about how to navigate a music industry career. I just started my first column last week, and I'm looking forward to diving into that side of my blog, which I do want to have a focus on music industry, hence why I created it. So yeah, go check me out on those platforms, and I look forward to connecting with anyone that listens to this podcast. And if you want to learn more about music marketing, A&R, and marketing to Gen Z, feel free to ping me on LinkedIn, and I would love to chat with you. I'd love to learn other people's experiences. I'd love to share my wisdom. And yeah, Amaya, it was so great having this conversation. And I know we're both passionate about the work that we both do, which brings us together. And shout out to her. You're an incredible host.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And guys, don't forget to check out all of those amazing links and connect with her. There's always more that you can learn about music and marketing, and especially from an early career standpoint, she is your connect.
Thank you.
That's a wrap for today's episode of the Intentional Intern Podcast. We hope you're leaving with fresh insights and a boost of motivation to take on your career journey. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow, leave a review, and share it with your network. Connect with us on LinkedIn and Instagram and let us know your thoughts. Your feedback fuels our next great episode. Until next time, stay intentional, keep growing, and keep shining bright. See you in the next episode.